The Boston Celtics have had a more turbulent season than the previous one. That's a fact. Last year, the team was absolutely dominant, raising expectations to an almost impossible level to maintain. Any inconsistency would seem like a setback. But the reality is that, despite some stumbles, the Celtics are still one of the best teams in the NBA and remain firmly in the fight for the top of the Eastern Conference. The final stretch before the All-Star break showed a team returning to its best form, winning 7 of its last 8 games. This positive momentum came after a more unstable period between December and January, when the team's weaknesses became evident. But are these issues just natural fluctuations in a long season, or are they warning signs that could jeopardize their bid for back-to-back championships? The truth is that some concerns continue to linger around the team, and ignoring them could be a mistake. Let's analyze 3 issues that still trouble the Celtics and could shape the course of their season. If there's one factor that could threaten the Celtics' quest for back-to-back championships, it's the team's health. While Boston hasn't faced any major injuries this season, minor ones are starting to pile up, raising a serious concern. Can the team maintain this pace without fatigue taking a toll in the playoffs? Jrue Holiday, a key defensive anchor and an essential playmaker, missed 4 consecutive games before the All-Star break. Jaylen Brown also sat out 2 games. Sam Hauser, one of the team's best shooters, has dealt with lingering back pain throughout the season. And Kristaps Porzingis, who has a well-documented injury history, has already had minor physical setbacks. Not to mention Jason Tatum, who, despite not missing many games, has led the NBA in minutes played over the past few years. So far, the Celtics have managed well, handling these short-term absences without compromising their performance. But can their luck hold? The NBA season is a marathon, and the real battle begins in the playoffs, where every possession matters, and every player needs to be at peak physical condition. One crucial difference from last year is that Boston is feeling the impact of these minor injuries more frequently. In 2023-24, the team had an unusually healthy campaign, which contributed to their dominant playoff run. Now, even without a catastrophic injury, signs of wear and tear are already showing. This raises an important question. Should the Celtics start managing their players more carefully? Load management has been a controversial practice in the NBA, but with such a talented and deep roster, Boston has the luxury of strategically reducing minutes to preserve its stars. Porzingis, for example, could benefit from a more controlled schedule to prevent minor injuries from becoming serious issues. Holiday, a physical player, also needs to be at 100% to remain the defensive force the team relies on in the postseason. Another key factor is whether the bench has enough depth to cover for these absences if they become more frequent. Peyton Pritchard has been a reliable backup for Holiday, but can he handle that responsibility over an extended period? Can Luke, Kornet, and Neemias Queta hold down the paint if Porzingis misses significant time? And if one of the starting wings goes down, does Boston have enough depth to maintain its rotation without a major drop-off? These questions need answers before the playoffs arrive. The Celtics' biggest threat might not be a Western Conference powerhouse or an Eastern Conference rival. It could be their own physical endurance. If healthy, this roster has everything needed to win another title. But if these minor injuries keep stacking up, Boston could be facing a much bigger problem than expected. The question is, should the Celtics keep pushing for the best regular season record, or start managing minutes to ensure they're fully healthy for the playoffs? Finding the right balance could be the difference between glory and disappointment in May and June. The Boston Celtics may have the best starting lineup in the NBA, but when it comes to wing depth, some questions start to arise. Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown are superstars who shoulder much of the responsibility. But who is truly ready to contribute behind them? This may seem like a minor concern in the regular season, But in the playoffs, it could become a real obstacle. The addition of Torrey Craig was a necessary move that, in theory, helps address this issue. His debut was solid, and if he can establish himself as a reliable piece in the rotation, the problem becomes much less concerning. But relying solely on that is a risk. Craig is a useful, defensively versatile player, but he's just arriving and will need time to adapt to the system. Additionally, his offensive production has never been consistent throughout his career. He could be one of those role players who thrives in a well-structured system, or someone who simply doesn't fit. Joe Mazzulla has been looking for internal solutions, recently giving minutes to Baylor Shireman, while Jordan Walsh and Drew Peterson also had opportunities earlier in the season. But counting on rookies to play meaningful roles on a championship contending team is, at best, a calculated risk. Shireman is a promising shooter who can provide spacing, but his defense remains a question mark at the NBA level. Walsh has the physical tools to be an elite defender, but needs to develop his offensive game. And Peterson, despite being talented, doesn't seem ready for a significant role in a playoff rotation. Another name that could help alleviate this issue is Sam Hauser. He has been extremely efficient as a shooter, but his defensive limitations make him a situational piece in certain matchups. When Hauser is hitting his shots, the Celtics' offense reaches another level. But what happens when he's not? Does he offer enough to stay on the floor? Recent playoff history shows that opposing teams exploit defensive weaknesses, which could limit Hauser's impact when the games become more physical and intense. This brings us to a bigger question. Can the Celtics rely solely on Tatum and Brown to cover crucial wing minutes in the playoffs? Their workload is already massive, and any physical setback could further expose this lack of depth. Looking at recent NBA champions, most teams had reliable options in their wing rotation. The Denver Nuggets, for example, had Bruce Brown and Aaron Gordon covering multiple roles alongside Michael Porter Jr. The Golden State Warriors have always found ways to develop and utilize versatile wings, such as Andrew Wiggins and Otto Porter Jr. in 2022. Boston needs at least one more dependable player at this position to avoid unnecessary risks. The solution could come internally, with Craig stepping into that role, or externally, through the buyout market or a targeted trade. But this issue needs to be addressed. Tatum and Brown can't carry this responsibility alone, and the playoffs aren't the ideal time to find out if Baylor Shireman or Jordan Walsh are ready for the challenge. If Boston truly wants to maximize its championship chances, solving the wing depth problem isn't just a detail. It's a necessity. Is this a real problem or just a side effect of the Celtics' playing style? The issue of in-game lapses has been a recurring theme throughout the season. The team dominates large portions of games, but at key moments allows runs that simply shouldn't happen. Most of the time, this doesn't translate into losses. Rather, it leads to games that become much more competitive than they should be. And that raises a legitimate concern. Could these lapses prove costly in the playoffs? Take the game against the Miami Heat, for example. A defensive meltdown resulted in a 7-0 run for the opponent, suddenly putting a comfortable lead at risk. At other times, a lack of offensive movement leads to wasted possessions with forced isolation shots, completely disrupting the team's rhythm. Are these patterns symptoms of a bigger issue? Or are they just natural hiccups within the flow of a game? The optimistic argument is that this Celtics team has enough talent to correct these lapses when it really matters. During the 2024 Finals against the Dallas Mavericks, Boston had moments of instability, but always found a way to regain control. Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, and Drew Holiday are experienced enough to adjust in-game. However, relying on that can be dangerous. A bad stretch in the playoffs could be the difference between a repeat championship and an early exit. Another key question: are these lapses a mental issue, or a reflection of the team's tactical approach? Under Joe Mazzulla, the Celtics emphasize three-point shooting and fast ball movement. When the team is locked in, the offense is lethal. But when confidence dips, there's a tendency to rely on isolation plays, leading to offensive stagnation. Defensively, Boston fluctuates between total dominance and inexplicable lapses, perhaps a sign of a less consistent level of intensity at times. If Boston truly wants to establish itself as a dynasty, rather than just a team that had one magical year, it needs to fix this inconsistency. Whether it's a matter of rotation adjustments, mental focus, or simply a shift in approach, something has to change. One thing is certain, in the playoffs, where every possession matters, these lapses could be costly. Can the Celtics afford to keep playing with this margin for error? Hey, Celtics fanatics! What do you think of this news? Leave your opinion in the comments, as it's highly valued.